Dear viewers, this is Zahirul Alam. Welcome you all on Frankly Speaking. Our guest today is Professor Lim Yean Teng, a senior consultant cardiologist of Mount Elizabeth Hospital of Singapore. Professor Lim graduated from the National University of Singapore's Faculty of Medicine in 1983. He completed his postgraduate training in internal medicine and underwent cardiology training at the Epworth Hospital in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, and the National University Hospital in Singapore. He then spent 18 months at the Division of Cardiovascular Diseases, University of Alabama at Birmingham, United States of America, as both nuclear and interconventional cardiology fellow. We welcome Professor Lim on Frankly Speaking.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Lim, you are visiting Bangladesh, and this is perhaps the first visit in Bangladesh. And we know that you have spent almost 24 years in public services, in medical profession. So first of all, we would like to know that as a specialist doctor, as a medical professional, how do you look at the basic medical services to the people? What is the scenario in Singapore?
Right. Now in Singapore, we are a little bit fortunate. The country is small, and we have a fairly well-organized medical system. So no one actually will be denied medical care in a sense that there's always a fallback system for them. We do divide patients into different classes. So even if you're not very well off, let's say you go to the C class, 80% of your bill will be picked up by the government and the 20% will be by yourself. If you cannot do it, your family members can actually help to contribute to your medical bill, and you can even pay by installment. So I suppose the basic thing is that the government doesn't want to have a free system where people will just continue using it unlimited, where if you co-pay, you may think a little more carefully. But for those who really cannot afford, even this 20% will be taken care of by the system.
But definitely the situation prevailing in Singapore, that doesn't really happen in our country like Bangladesh.
Right.
So I would like to know that in your short span of visiting time in Bangladesh, you have already met some peoples, and you will going to meet some of them, including the medical professionals.
Yes.
So what are you actually looking at your visit in Bangladesh?
Well, I think, as we doctors always say, sometimes it is a real world, and some people find it difficult to afford especially the newer technologies that's expensive. So if possible, actually I would like to let the people know it is always better to prevent the disease than to try to manage it after it has happened. Let's say for heart disease, as an example, I mean smoking, no exercise, taking very oily food. These are the things that build up to future heart diseases, which one has control in hand and can try to nip at the bud when it first starts. So I suppose patient education, letting the public know what to do, it might be better than trying to catch the disease and try to treat them when it has established and
generally, how would you define the major causes of heart disease?
Right. I would say that maybe a simple classification would be those that you acquired at birth, what we call the congenital heart disease. Okay. A good example would be, for example, hole in the heart when you're born with it, or let's say a certain valve problem that you are born with it. But the other big group
is it very common?
Fortunately
phenomenon?
not. Even if it is the so-called common ones, they are the relatively, let's say, easier to treat ones. They are very bad congenital heart problem, but unfortunately those babies don't do too well. And well, that helps to sort of control the number. Okay. But nowadays, with good treatment, some of these congenital patients do live to adulthood, yes.
But how does the heart disease affect the people of all ages?
Right. I would say that there are different conditions that affects people of different ages. I think, as I say, in the young, probably some congenital heart disease. In a country that where I would say socio-economic status is not very good, there's this condition called rheumatic heart disease, which is a result of rheumatic fever. And that is actually a virus that can be passed on among children, and the virus sort of cross-react and cause reaction to the heart. So that is common in the 5 to 15 age group. So when we go on to the older age group, valvular heart diseases like heart valve leaking, let's say mitral valve prolapse will be common. But certainly when once, let's say male goes on to 40s, 50s, and female certainly in their 60s, coronary artery disease will be the most common that's affecting the group.
In the present situation?
Yes.
Okay. So what are some of the other risk factors of heart disease?
Right. So for coronary artery disease, let's say I usually divide it into two sets again. What we call the non-modifiable risk factor. By that I mean age, let's say your gender, as well as family history. I mean, we can't get younger. I mean, we can't choose our sex when we are born. Male has higher incidence of coronary heart disease than female. If you have a family history, your parents has coronary heart disease, you are at a higher risk of getting it. But again, you can't choose who your parents are.
So what are the symptoms? How could I be aware about these symptoms, that these are the signs when I have potential chances of having heart attack?
Before I go on to symptoms, may I just finish the other half, which is the non-modifiable one. I mean, the modifiable risk factor, that is the more important one. Diabetes, hypertension, smoking, overweight, non-exercise, chronic stress. These are the modifiable risk factor. Well, heart artery disease or coronary artery disease, I always say that you think of coronary artery like a road. If the road is supposed to have 4 lanes and suddenly you have an area that is down to 2 lanes, potentially you might cause traffic jam at certain time of the day, like peak hours. So if our heart artery is narrow, when we are resting, a lot of time we don't...
How many arteries are there?
Oh, sorry, by the way, we have 3 arteries. So it's like 3 highways around your heart area. That's
3 highways?
3 highways, supplying blood to the heart muscle. So most of the time, when you and I are sitting, talking to each other, the heart doesn't have to work very hard. So even if the artery has some narrowing, like the route is now down to 2 lanes, but because traffic flow is not heavy, you don't see traffic jam. So you don't get symptom. A lot of time you may be without symptom. But the moment we start walking upstairs, walking up a slope, running, the heart has to work harder. Now it's peak traffic situation. When blood wants to go through, you find that it's hard to get through the obstruction. People might start feeling chest tightness, heaviness. Some people describe as pain. Or you find that previously you can walk for long distance.
If you don't feel pain, then what will you feel?
Sometimes breathlessness. Yeah, instead of, I mean, all of us get breathless when we exercise. The only thing is previously we might be able to do a lot. Now by doing much lesser distance, we feel breathless, we feel that we need to stop. That may be a warning sign that you have coronary heart disease, actually.
In the present world, what is your study says that, how many people around the world, do you have any study on that?
Well, I would say that...
I think it's an alarming rate.
In terms of, let's look at causes of death in Singapore. I can't say for your country because I don't have the data. Heart disease has been the #1 killer in Singapore up till somewhere in the late 80s and early 90s, where cancer overtakes it. But even then, we look at the data, now the cancer as a cause of death is about 26% of death in Singapore. Heart disease about 25%. So it's only 1 percentage point different. So I would say in Singapore and in most westernized country, coronary artery disease is actually one of certainly the major leading causes of death in the country. But in the let's say less developed country, a lot of time infectious disease may still be a common cause of death. But in a more developed country, those are usually treatable, and therefore it becomes lower in the causes of death.
Professor Lim, you're emphasizing on the prevention of a disease, especially when you're talking about heart disease. But how to prevent, basically? What are the important tips for human beings that they could prevent before they get affected with the
When we come to prevention, as a general rule, medical professionals speaks about primary prevention and secondary prevention. Primary prevention, as I say, is to prevent the disease even before it happens. So therefore, if I'm a smoker, I should seriously consider giving up. That's right.
Quit.
Do it, and that's the only way. In fact, you save money. You don't even have to pay to do that. And then if you have hypertension, you have diabetes and cholesterol, you manage those things well, you will prevent, or at least you lessen the chance that you get it. Now, by secondary prevention, we mean that people, let's say I have a heart attack, and I managed to survive, thank God for that. So I want to prevent a second heart attack. Now, that is what we call secondary prevention. Other than controlling all this risk factor, I think you need to have a healthy lifestyle. Of course, stress is something that we wish we can avoid, but sometimes certainly we can help to manage that better, and that will enable us to prevent or to avoid a second heart attack, which is secondary prevention.
But what do you recommend? How to lead a very healthy life to prevent this?
Unfortunately, I always say no pain, no gain. Sometimes it's like preaching a sermon. You're trying to tell people to exercise, to lose weight, It's easier for me just to sit down and watch a TV than to go on a treadmill machine and exercise there for the next 30 minutes. Well, but sometimes I think you can combine the two. I mean, some people are fortunate enough to have, let's say, a cross trainer at home. You can watch a TV program while you exercise. But I would say that you really need to make an effort to control cholesterol. There are things that you love to eat, but you may just have to manage your amount of it. It doesn't mean you cannot take at all, but you do have to control your intake and so on. So a lot of this thing, it needs a
What about
active
dieting?
effort. Dieting certainly is important. The surest way for weight loss, I mean, if you just diet alone, probably not enough. Diet and exercise together, that is, it's like a bank account. What you put inside in terms of calorie and what you burn.
Yeah.
So if you take in more than what you burn, well, I think you just need to combine the two.
Professor Lim, I'm very curious about what should one do if you could suspect that you are having a heart attack. What do you do then?
Okay, maybe I'll just go through the signs of what does one get when one has a heart attack. Usually, you have a sudden onset of this quite severe chest pain, and a lot of time you will be sort of sweating. You might feel like vomiting, throwing out, and sometimes you feel faint because the pressure can be coming down. And chest pain, when you're having a heart attack, usually doesn't go away, and it may be continuous. Generally, what we call you walk, you have chest pain, you sit down, you rest, 5 minutes, you will go away. Any chest pain that lasts more than 15, 20 minutes, for all intent and purposes, I would say treat it as for heart attack. We always tell people if you have a heart attack, the best thing to ensure that you survive well is call an ambulance, go to hospital early, because we say time is muscle. The longer you wait, the more heart muscle will be damaged. Even when you go to hospital and seek treatment, there's very little that I can do to save the muscle that is dead. On the other hand, the usual cause of a heart attack is a blood clot blocking the artery. So if I can give you some medicine to dissolve the clot, to re-establish blood flow, or if I can use a balloon to smash the clot and establish blood flow, I will help you to save heart muscle that is not dead yet. So in essence, call an ambulance, get to hospital early, then try to self-medicate and treat at home. I suppose at home there's one thing you can do. Try to take aspirin if you're not allergic, 300 milligram, chew it, swallow it, because aspirin has this anti-platelet effect, which is what we'll give to all patients when they come to emergency anyway.
Okay, that's a very good prescription. What are the special procedures that cure heart disease? Do you have? Would you like to get some tips from?
Right. So if you have suspected coronary artery disease, a lot of the time your doctor will order a simple EKG. But what I would need to warn people is that a normal EKG at rest doesn't mean that we exclude heart problem. As I say, if the route is narrow, you look at the situation that during off-peak hours, you may not pick up the problem. Right. And that's where an ETT or exercise treadmill test comes in. A lot of time, doctor will put you on the treadmill, monitor your heart. And there are certain features that might suggest that you may have a heart problem based on the ETT. But again, I need to warn people that the ETT accuracy is about 65%. In other words, maybe 1/3 of the time, the ETT says that you have no heart problem.
You're talking about the phenomena in Singapore?
It's general worldwide,
okay.
because that is the limitation of the test.
Okay.
So if you exercise on the treadmill and the EKG is abnormal or normal, sometimes it doesn't exclude heart disease or establish heart disease. So I think seeking the help of an expert probably is the best way to help you to find out whether you have a heart problem or not.
You emphasize on exercise.
Yes.
One of the major tips is exercise. What do you think? Do women get the same benefits from exercise as men?
Well, we would honestly feel that there should be no difference in benefit from exercise because of gender. Women actually has a little bit of a disadvantage, and we find that, well, America's studies again has shown that sometimes women tend to, because we always feel that women is less likely to have heart disease than male, sometimes when they complain of certain things, people tend to sort of think that they are less likely to be heart problem, or they themselves think that they are less likely to have heart disease. When they go for treatment, sometimes their artery is smaller. So smaller artery, less difficult to balloon and stent, less difficult to do a bypass. So they do have a certain disadvantage. But exercise, certainly, I believe they will derive exactly the same benefit as male sex like us, you see.
I think you have a huge experience, or especially the Mount Elizabeth Hospital experience with dealing with the cases of bypass surgery. What is the success rate in your hospital, right?
Well, bypass success rate as a general rule depends on the risk profile of the patient. I would say that if the patient is of good risk, no kidney problem, no history of stroke, and the heart is still strong, you go for a bypass, I think the risk generally will be less than 3%, 2% or so. But generally, if you have someone who is of elderly age is a very important predictor of risk. Secondly, let's say you have stroke before plus the heart is weak, then sometimes the risk profile can go up to 5% or even 10% if the patient presents with what we call unstable coronary syndrome.
Professor Lim, you know, and I think you are very aware about that. Some rich people can afford to go Singapore in the hospital Mount Elizabeth and get treated over there. But most of the poor people in our country, they doesn't have the access of better medical treatment or services. So what do you think? I know Singapore is very advanced in medical sciences and other services. So how we can get some benefit from the experience of Singapore?
Well, I think trying to work out some form of collaboration. Some hospital, like University Hospital in Singapore, they do have this MOU program, Memorandum of Understanding, where they will help the hospital to develop a certain area of need, and it's a good fit for both whole hospital and country. And again, in this what we call government teaching hospital, sometimes we open up what we call fellowship program. For example, we have doctors from China, from the Philippines, from Vietnam. The young doctors come spend a year with us training how to do ballooning, stenting, and then they go back and benefit their own people. I think that's the best way we can help too. I mean, while we can come and visit here and try to work together with your doctors, I think that the chance of spending a year overseas, how people do their things in contrast to how you do it back home. And that's why I was sent to the States when I was, a lot younger, so that I can bring back the second stand that has been developed.
From your National University Hospital?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was at university too, so they call it a study leave. So it's like sabbatical for me. And we bring back the technology back to Singapore, and I pass it to the rest of my doctors. That's how we have a multiplying effect, rather than just this short-term come for 2 days, 3 days. I think the benefit will be a lot less, actually.
To be very precise, what is your purpose of visit in Bangladesh? Is it very commercially organized, or you have some
I would say
interest
that
about Bangladesh?
if I want to be commercial, I think I will stay at home. I see more patients, because by coming, I'm closing my clinic back home. I'm actually losing money. So I'm still a visiting staff or adjunct professor to university. I still go back and teach. I find that you interact with doctors, imparting your knowledge to the patients, I think it's a very powerful thing, and it's a very satisfying thing to do. So, I would say that based on commercial, that's why my wife always tells me going out means bad news.
Bad news. No money.
No money.
We're almost at the end of our program. So one more question is that as a patient, how can one make sure that their children, basically the children's, they have also very significant chances of get heart disease and other things. So how they could make it sure that their children are physically fit,
right,
and risk-free from heart disease or coronary heart problems,
yes,
coronary artery diseases?
Right. I think when I was a student, when I went to one of the community to do a study, that was in 1980 or so, the most common problem then was underweight, malnutrition. 20 years later, a group of students went back to the same area or do similar study. They find that the commonest problem in Singapore in children is obesity. So
Obesity.
I think a lot of time, because I think in Singapore, I'm not quite sure about the average family size. We have only 1 child, 2 children. You pour everything you have into these 2 children, whatever they want to eat, they all put on weight, obesity, as I said. Unfortunately, all this plaque or the narrowing in the artery, in the American soldier that died in Korean War, the GIs, they find that by teenage, they are already having all this problem. So I think adopting healthy lifestyle, ensure that they don't go overweight. While you want to spoil them a little, don't overdo it. Make them have all this exercise, as I said before, healthy lifestyle living. Right from early, I think that will last them a lifetime actually.
So you mentioned that many foreign experts or students are going to your university hospital and they are imparting with some higher studies with medical sciences. So what do you think from Bangladesh side we can also get some benefit from those courses or those programs?
No, certainly I think there's no reason why doctors or from Bangladesh cannot go to Singapore. But I must say I haven't had a chance to have a chance to train one of them yet. But I think that what you need is a good pioneer with a good groundwork of basic medicine. Go to Singapore, any of the public hospital, create an impression. In fact, the second one from Bangladesh come, will say, please send to my hospital. We want them. And I think we are very willing to help people from different countries of the world. I think in the end, that's how I say the world has become smaller. We are functioning like one big bodies. And for doctors, certainly, we're most happy to share our knowledge with our fellow colleagues in other countries.
Okay, as a visitor, how did you find Bangladesh?
Well, I would say that I'm less than 24 hours here. I can see quite a big disparity. There are areas, there are people who are very affluent and well off. Certainly, I do see that they are the spec end of the spectrum. So I think this is a country where we have problems to solve. On the other hand, you see that there are lots of opportunities and there are lot of for good work waiting to be done. And I think that is the promising part.
We're looking forward to that prospect. Thank you very much, Professor Lim, for coming and joining us on Frankly Speaking.
It's a privilege to be on your program.
Yeah, thank you so much. Dear viewers, Professor Lim, who is regarded as a key opinion leader in the field of interconventional cardiology and regularly invited as speaker, chairperson, moderator for major coronary and scientific meetings, courses in the area of interconventional cardiology in Asia, Pacific, almost around the world. We hope our medical study and services can be benefited and strengthened through forging some better collaborations with the countries advanced in medical sciences like Singapore. We are looking forward to receive continuous assistance from the persons like Professor Lim. Dear viewers, we thank you very much for watching our program and join us on next episode with another guest. Until then, do take care and bye-bye.